Hello, good morning, everyone. I want to go back to something that Melinda started with, which is becoming a Foreign Service officer, how many of us come from a variety of backgrounds. My bachelor's degree was in psychology, and I went on to get a master's degree in social studies education, and I actually worked as a teacher in the United States for a number of years. So students are very near and dear to my heart, and I'm very, very happy to see many of you here in our audience today with curiosities about studying in the United States. There's many opportunities, of course, at the bachelor's degree level and on up through PhDs, and to include in extra training once you've received your PhD and you want to do more research or be a part of different kinds of training programs. Of course, F1s are our main student visa category for anybody who wants to go for a full-time course of study, but there's also programs for improving English or taking training courses that just are for a short-term stay, and those could be done on a B1 visa as well as other student visa categories. J1 visas and M1 visas are designed for training courses and also for getting work experience and other kinds of skills. So there are approximately 200,000 Indian-based students who are now in the United States pursuing their studies. That's a huge number, and India represents the second largest group of students in the United States. Of course, China being the first one, because so far they're still the largest country, and I know India is going to overtake that soon, and India is going to send more students to the United States. Melinda talked about the demand, excuse me, for visitor visas, business visas, but also we're seeing an increased demand and interest in studying in the United States. And so with that, coming in 2023, when we start our student visa season, we're going to try to increase across India by 10% the number of visas that we process and issue to get as many students in the United States as possible. For calendar year 2022, so far we have issued over 82,000 visas for students to go and start their studies there. Just a quick word on applying for a student visa. The steps are the same. You go to usatraveldocs.com and you create an account there. You submit your application. You have to pay the fee, of course, and then have an appointment to go drop off your passport and do your biometrics, which means fingerprints and photo, and then you come to the consulate for an interview. Just a word on the in-person interview. It's generally fast. Some people are kind of surprised at how quickly the officer will speak to you. It's usually just a few minutes. They want to get a sense of what you're going to study, how prepared you are to go and study in the United States, and they may not look at any documents you bring with you. So don't be surprised that it's mostly just conversation and based on the answers that you give to their questions. Sometimes the officer might ask you some personal questions. Where do your parents work? How do you intend to pay for your travels and your studies in the United States? Do you have family in the United States? Those are all kind of personal questions that we don't generally just tell strangers. However, in a consular interview, we may ask that you share that information, so don't be surprised. I want to go back and talk a little bit about what actually a U.S. visa is. There's some misconceptions sometimes. Once you have a visa in your passport, you are good to go. However, a U.S. visa is meant to be something that gives you permission to get on a plane, travel to the United States, and ask for permission to enter the country. Our Border Patrol officers in the United States make the ultimate decision about whether they're going to allow you to come in. However, 99.9% of the people who have a visa are allowed to enter the United States, so don't take that as any kind of caution. I just want to make it clear, though, that when we here at the consulate approve a visa, we don't have the authority to approve that you actually get to enter the United States. A U.S. visa is not permission to remain in the United States. Generally speaking, you have about a 6-month period. However, in the case of students, it can be for a few years that you're allowed to stay in the United States based on the duration that's there on the visa. And a US visa, is not permission to work in the United States in most cases. For some of our visa categories that allow people to work in the US, it's because our Department of Homeland Security has already approved a petition that says that an employee can be brought in on a visa to do certain kinds of work. Student visas are kind of an exception to that, though. Students do generally have the ability to work in part-time jobs while they're in the United States. I myself, when I was an undergrad student, worked on campus part-time to help pay for my studies, so there's always those kind of opportunities if you are there on a student visa. So the other topic of interest today is the B1 visa. And I just want to mention that generally speaking, we don't issue straight B1 visas. Those are meant for business travel. We prefer to issue what we call the B1, B2 visa, which is for business and tourism. If you get a 10-year visa and it's only a B1 visa and you want to go back later to take your family to do sightseeing in New York or to go to Disney or any such thing, you would have to get a different visa. So we've decided that it makes more sense if you qualify for a business visa, you clearly qualify for a tourist visa as well. So you can travel back and forth depending on your purpose. Most of the people in India qualify for a 10-year visa. Some people, generally kids who are under the age of 14, will only get a 5-year visa, and that's just meant to make it easier to travel back and forth as many times as you would like to during that 10-year period. So a B1 visa or a B2 visa is meant to be for a short-term visit. I mentioned earlier, up to 6 months you can stay in the United States. And it's meant, as Dr. VASQUEZ mentioned earlier, it's for consultations, negotiating a deal, attending a conference or a workshop or a big trade show in Las Vegas or something of that nature, but it's not to be for productive work. So you wouldn't travel to the US on a B1 visa to do any kind of work, especially if it's work that you would receive payment for from somebody in the United States. When you come in for an interview for that kind of visa, the idea is that you would be able to provide some kind of credible evidence, usually through the interview, about your purpose of travel and why you should be going. I mentioned earlier that we do have some visas for workers, and it's not on our agenda, but I will just mention that we have H-1B and L visas, and those are meant to be for people who have an approved petition by our Department of Homeland Security to go and work in the United States, sometimes for American-based companies. In L visas, it's usually an Indian-based company who's sending somebody to transfer. Some people also qualify for what we call interview waivers. If you have had any kind of valid visa to the United States within the last 4 years, you could qualify for interview waivers versus having to come to the consulate for an interview. As of now, our backlog for interview waiver B1, B2 visas has been eliminated. There are appointments available in the next few weeks. Not here in Calcutta, unfortunately, as Melinda mentioned, they are in other posts in India because they have bigger processing capacities, but there are abilities to get an appointment for an interview waiver if you just need to renew your visa. If you are a student and you're going for your first student visa, but you've had a visitor visa in the past, you can qualify also for an interview waiver. Even though it might be your first time going as a student, there are possibilities for interview waiver if you've had some kind of visa. In-person interviews are, I think, kind of the sticking point. And as Melinda mentioned, demand has far exceeded anything that we anticipated for the next couple of years. I do think that in the next few weeks, there will be an increase in the number of appointments available within India. So if you are interested in getting an interview for a first-time visa applicant, please continue to check our websites and see when appointments become available, because there are some coming very soon. The Department of State is very interested in making sure that we address this backlog. Of course, India is a critically important partner for the United States, and we want to make sure that we do whatever we can to address this backlog. So there are plans in place. They are coming. I can't give all the details, unfortunately, but please do keep checking for appointments. Back to the expedited appointments criteria. If you're going because of a medical need, or you are the immediate family member of a person in the United States who has a medical need and you need to be there for that, or other kinds of urgent needs of travel, a business negotiation that would completely fall through if you weren't able to travel to the United States right away, we do have some ability to move up some appointments. So please go to our website. There is easy abilities there to use contact forms to let us know what's going on, and then we're able to look at each of those cases individually and determine whether we're able to expedite or move up your appointment. In order to do that, though, you do have to have an appointment. Even if that appointment isn't until 2024 or something, we can't expedite appointment until something has already been scheduled, but we can help you if there are extreme circumstances that mean you need to travel right away. That's it for me, and I know that there will be lots of questions about visas, and I'm happy to answer whatever I can. Thank you.